Alright, it's time again to do my favorite segment that we do on this channel, which is talking about Emily Blunt's movies, which we've talked about all the way from the beginning to now to these current ones as they come out. And we're actually going to get two pretty close together here. For some reason, I don't know how I messed this up. In the last video, I had said that I was thinking that If was like at the end of next month or something, but no, it's like this coming week, which is great. So that's going to probably be... There's going to be a few videos in between, but that'll be not long after this one. But yes, I do want to talk about The Fall Guy, because... Well, there's a few things going into this before we even get to the movie itself. I will say, I mentioned before, I think we were talking about Pain Hustlers, and we were talking about what was coming up. I had said that I was a little concerned because this movie was by David Leitch, who is this legendary stuntman and knows action and the way, movies are made so well. And his previous movies as a director have been, Hobbs and Shaw and Atomic Blonde and Deadpool 2 and Bullet Train. All movies that are beloved in one way or another by their particular fan bases. And just to be, transparent, but not, like, hate or anything like that, I don't want it to sound like that, I haven't liked any of those four movies. So I was a little concerned going into this one, but it does feel like that this is the movie that he was born to make. It's like he made those other movies so he could get to the point in his directing career that he could make this movie, is what it feels like to me. And when you see, the talk of stonework, like at the very beginning of the movie, and during the end credits also, but we get this nice little montage in the very opening, where it's like, at first I thought it was like a montage, like, of the movie itself, but then I started to figure out, it's like, oh, that kind of looked like Atomic Blonde, and, well, that was definitely the bus scene from Nobody, and it's like, oh, it's an actual montage of, like, actual stunts from other movies, which is where, like, actual clips, which is a fantastic way to start. And then this opening scene, where we have the introduction of Gosling's character in this kind of one take, where he starts on the ground, he goes all the way up in an elevator, and then drops. And it's, if I remember correctly, it was all one shot. And Leitch is one of those directors where he comes from that particular kind of background to where it's like, in this particular case, I feel like that was actually one shot, because I was very critical of the long take in Atomic Blonde, the long take in big quotes, because it was so, you could see where all of the cheat cuts were, and the fact that it basically made a mockery of the long take action scene. And so to actually see real long takes in this one was really refreshing. Or at least, if there are cheat cuts in there, they're very well hidden, which is great. But there's also another one, they're more low-key. Like, it's not like it was in Atomic Blonde, where it's like, let's see how many things we can pack into one long take just for the sake of it. Because another great one is this scene where Blunt's character Jody is directing, and it kind of puts you in that, this had to have been coming from a personal place, where you can see all the responsibilities a director has, where it's like, you have one problem here that needs to be fixed, and then there's somebody over here saying, oh, we've got this problem, and oh, we've got to sort this out, and oh, we're running out of time, is the lighting going to be right, is the sun going to go down, and all of this at the same time. We kind of see her getting overwhelmed because it's her first movie as a director, and so it's like, I imagine, like, you can see, that comes from the personal experience. I want to say Atomic Blonde was the first one of Leitch's movies that he directed, and I could see the uncredited direction on John Wick as well. But it's like, that just feels like that's coming from a very real place of showing you how hectic a director's job can be. But yet at the same time, as somebody that's the dream job, it's like the more problems she was being overwhelmed with, the more it was like, yeah, this is something I actually really want to do. Like, you can sense where it's like, this is how hectic movies are, but it also comes through but still, this job is awesome. Even though it's very overwhelming and demanding and might break you, it's like the best job ever at the same time. That's the vibe I get from this movie, and from somebody who's always loved movies as both a moviegoer and from the technical standpoint and all that, and how they're made. This is like, the word love letter gets thrown around so much, But fuck it. It obviously works here. There's a reason it's being thrown around with this movie as well, because that's what it is. So, another thing I want to talk about before we get into, like, because obviously, Leach was a stunt person, this is about stunt people, and it's like, there's gonna be great action, and it's gonna be real action. It's gonna be something we've been craving from action movies for a while now, is that real feeling. Obviously, that's been established, we know. They've been marketing the movie like crazy. They're still on there. I was just watching Blunt's appearance on Drew Barrymore's show the other day, and it's like this has been a very ongoing promotional campaign. So, going on the idea of what we already know, there was something going into this that I actually found kind of surprising, even though I shouldn't have been surprised. It's the fact that you look at all the promotional material and you see Gosling and you see Blunt, and they're always sort of together. Like, there's not one star between them, like they are the co-leads of the movie. The stars are both of them. Despite the fact that Gosling is the one playing the stunt person and will be in the big action scenes and all that. And so, you would think when you typically see a poster like that, your first thought is action star, love interest, is what your first thought is. And I kept seeing, promotional material that looked like that, and I just kept thinking, like, Blunt wouldn't have taken this part if it was just to be the love interest. She wouldn't take this part unless she really got to do, like, her thing and got to, be in the action and be a very central character. And the fact that it would be co-leads and not just one lead plus a love interest. So I should have known going in that the whole love interest thing would not have been the case. Where it is, I was really surprised by how romantic this movie is. Like, it's just as much of a love story as it is an action movie. In some cases, maybe even more. Like the thing that's driving Gosling the whole movie, getting into the situations he's getting into, is so she can make her movie. Like, it's all the action scenes are essentially a romantic gesture towards Blunt's character. And I kind of love that. And it's also, we don't have to worry about the whole meet cute thing, where it's like, oh, they're kind of flirty, and oh, are they going to be a couple or are they not, stuff like that. I like the fact that they're already together when the movie starts. Mind you, there is an off-screen breakup and an 18-month jump, but it's just really refreshing to not deal with the meet cute shit. So it's like, even if they do have to rekindle something, I'd definitely rather watch a rekindling of a relationship in a movie than I would, oh, this is how they started, these were their honeymoon phase, then their initial conflicts, because the conflicts are always convoluted in romance stories. So here, that actually was a really big thing that kind of broke them up, and something that kind of emotionally and physically shattered him. And then essentially shattered their relationship. And to watch that kind of come back, because they have the chemistry that goes with that. Like, there's so many things to talk about just with this. I guess the first thing would be that we do see sort of how they met and how, the whole relationship came to be through, like, this montage of flashbacks when he's, the Taylor Swift montage, essentially, where we kind of see how they interacted on set and how this came to be. They were, like, she's playing with, the rubber knife and they're breaking bottles over his head and doing it the way these characters would, falling in love the way these characters would. And it also almost kind of felt like this sort of look behind a curtain a little bit, because you're always hearing about people falling in love on a movie set. Whether it be, crew members or actors and crew members, whatever it may be. And it's like this montage of watching what... obviously it's a bit of... Like with the breaking the bottle and stuff like that, it's a bit of an over-the-top version, because this character in particular is over the top. But it almost feels like this look of what falling in love on a movie set might feel like. And so that's a really nice montage. And then the other side of that being how incredibly awkward they are, which Blunt has said in the press, where it's like that was kind of what they were going for, because it's this very sort of... Everybody always looks so stoic and romantic in movies, and so, like, just to see these people who are both, like, messes, and the fact that like she's already in her place because she's directing her first movie, and she's kind of not over him and the way he left, and so her mind's just all over the place. And then of course he's been physically and emotionally broken, mentally broken, just everything, and he's just in a really bad place. And so you put these two people together again after 18 months. It's just gonna be weird and awkward, and messy, and that's the way they play it off, which is really great. I love the moment especially where he does the first stunt without her knowing it's him, and then when he whips his helmet off, and it's going to be this big reveal and this big sweeping emotional moment, it just abruptly cuts off. Like the scene cuts, the music cuts off, and her first response is like, what is he doing here? This is the worst thing that could happen to this movie right now. And then it goes from there. And we get those little moments, like when she does the dorky finger guns thing, or when he, you know, tightens her hat that keeps flying off in the middle of the scene. That almost looked like actually. I love how much it feels. You have to ask yourself, like, how scripted was that? Because it kind of feels like it wasn't. There's a lot of that, and even when she throws in the joke about how the hat that she's wearing, where she just says like, it's a set thing, which is hilarious because I was thinking before she even said that, it's like every time you see those behind the scenes shots of directors directing, um, people it's like a set requirement or something. Like it's like is that just a thing? And just adding that joke of it's a set thing. We just do that. It's like an admission from the movie industry itself, which is fantastic. And then we have those moments where it's like where she confronts him on the set. She confronts him through her directing, with the whole cast there, and of course there's the added thing of the cast being in like these alien costumes. There's the alien that kind of puts his 2 cents in, that still has like his voice modulator on. It's all very, very funny. It was getting really big laughs in the theater. Also, this was usually I try to kind of time it to where, because of the whole social anxiety thing. It's like I kind of try to time it when I go to movies to where I know not a lot of people are going to be there. The showtimes, like the neglected showtimes, is what I'll usually look for. But there were quite a few people in this showing, and this was one of those cases where sometimes it's not just always big action scenes or spectacle that is part of the movie-going experience. I know a lot of people are put off the movie-going experience nowadays because people can be obnoxious, and it's hard to watch movies with people who don't know how to be in public. But if you get a crowd like the one I had for this movie, then it's like you're reminded of why it's a really great way to watch a movie can be with a group of people who are all into it. And like sometimes there's these little moments that you can only get in an experience like that. One that really stood out to me is, like I said, maybe some people wouldn't like this kind of thing, but it was just like the environment was adding to the experience of watching the movie. There was a moment when it's the split screen scene when they're talking, and it's like, and they kind of have this sort of on the nose thing going on where they're talking about using split screen in the movie. The movie's actually using split screen. He's the space cowboy and she's the alien, and their analogy they're making, and she's wearing like an alien hand while she's talking, and it's like, and the fact that it basically knew how on the nose the scene was, so they just leaned into it, which is fantastic. But there's a moment in that scene where the audience experience took over for a second, and he says, he loosely quotes Notting Hill to her, and then he says, I know Notting Hill is your favorite movie, and you watch Love Actually every Christmas. And she says, oh, I watched Love Actually again, last year, and I didn't love it this time. I don't know if I love it anymore. And somebody in in the room, in the auditorium, in the crowd went, aw. Like, it's like, it's like that Love Actually fan that I was watching the movie with, this complete and total stranger, like 3 rows down, just enhance that scene with that one moment. It's like, that's another thing that you can only get from like the sort of theater experience also. Just the whole experience and everybody like laughing at the same time and reacting in that way is something that because the reason I bring this up specifically is obviously the movie's whole point is to do something kind of old fashioned and kind of that thing that we as moviegoers miss, whether we'll completely admit it or not. I know everybody's very happy with like their home systems and all that and their setups and stuff like that, and I totally get that. As somebody who hates going out in public, trust me, I get it. But yeah, this movie also was reminding me in like a number of ways how great the theater experience can still be. So that's something, because that's something that you can kind of get pretty cynical about and maybe a bit hopeless about almost. And so this was just, it was a good experience overall from many perspectives of the movie going experience, and I think Leach would be thrilled to know that that's the effect that it's having. So that's great, and everybody involved. As far as like the action scenes itself, yeah, like I said, there's not really a whole lot to say because obviously, if a stuntman's doing action scenes, and this is a guy that has John Wick on like his first directing credits, even if he's uncredited still. And it's like where we were kind of in that vibe where it was like John Wick and The Raid a couple of years before, but it was like this starting point of a new place that action movies reached. And so you got to give credit where it's due on that, where it's like action movies have really started to take on a new pattern, and it's like directors are getting more conscious of what actually a good action scene consists of. Being able to see the fucking thing, not having it, cut to pieces and all that. There are, there's maybe a couple of editing criticisms I could probably throw out. Where there's a couple of scenes where it's kind of the same thing going on, where and I can get, like, once these scenes reach their moment, where two separate scenes are happening at the same time and they're kind of coming together, even though they do come together nicely, and so there's a point to why it's edited the way it is. But take, for instance, one of the middle action scenes where Gosling's getting caught up in an action scene, and we're cutting back to Blunt at this karaoke bar waiting for him. And it's like, it does, if it were me, which it's not, but if it were me, I would tend to stay on an action scene as long as I can while it's happening, because cutting back to something sort of mundane and back and forth, it does kind of kill the vibe a little bit. But I do, like I said, I understand the point, because eventually we get to that point to where Blunt starts singing, and then that cutting back and forth with the action scene, that makes more sense. But when it was just sort of Blunt talking at the bar, cutting back to the action scene, was kind of, it was a weird vibe. But it's like, once she starts singing and we're cutting back and forth, then I get it. And then this is ultimately leading to another payoff, where it's like, are these scenes as aligned as they seem? And so that little payoff works. So there's that. Because there's also a scene that kind of has the same problem towards the end, where there's a big reveal happening, and we're cutting back and forth between it and Blunt in a screening room with Hannah Waddingham. And it's like, once again, eventually it makes sense why these are cutting back and forth between the other. But for a long time, it's like, it had a weird vibe. But like I said, that's just, since we brought up the editing, I figured I'd go ahead and throw that out there. But other than that, I don't really have any negative things to really say about the movie. The look of it is really nice. I love the neon action scene is really cool, where he's drugged and that's taking over. And then there's the running joke where he'll know the drug is worn off when he stops seeing a unicorn, and so you'll just see a unicorn in the background of scenes. Also very funny when you know that Blunt is about to play a unicorn in If, just in this next week. I'm going to assume that's a coincidence, but it's a very interesting coincidence that unicorns are that closely correlated between these two movies. And there's also, and of course, Blunt gets her own. I was wondering if the time was going to come. Blunt getting her own action scene, which is fantastic. And I love that it shows that as she's great at action scenes, which she has proven many times over. But I love that she's able to show off how good she is at action and fight scenes, while also this scene is very funny. where she's beating the shit out of somebody in an alien costume that she thinks is a villain, and they're trying to give the stunt person thumbs up. Very sort of like you can barely see it because she's so beating the shit out of him that she doesn't even notice that it's like, oh no, I'm not a villain. So that's a great scene also. And I love these moments with Gosling especially, where obviously people are nuts about the nice guys, and pretty much any time Gosling's doing press for a movie, he shows how incredibly funny he is, despite, you know, the many very dramatic parts that he's played, where there's almost like this goofy nature to him, which is fantastic. And this sort of perfect juxtaposition of when you see him in something like Drive or something. The way he laughs in Crazy Stupid Love is still like one of the best moments in movie history. And his whole Saturday Night Live episode this past, all the time, but this past one especially, was fantastic. Especially the monologue, because of you know who. But there are these moments that are fantastic because we've seen so much crazy shit happen in this movie with the unicorns and him being drugged and just all these fantastical scenarios. So there's like a couple of times in the movie where he has to recap what has happened to another character. And it's amazing because what he's saying sounds like absolute gibberish. But because we've been watching the movie, we understand him. And yet we completely understand how the characters he's explaining it to have no idea what he's talking about or what he's saying. And I love that. And that's good for us as moviegoers too, because it feels like we're in on an in-joke that the other characters aren't. When it's like, I am fully aware that sounded like gibberish, but at the same time I know exactly what he just said. And that's fantastic. I love that. So there is one criticism I've been hearing this movie get that's been pretty consistent. And it's something that I don't have a problem with, but I also think I probably didn't have a... Well, here's the thing. The criticism is that people think the movie might be too long. Like, it maybe goes on a bit too long. Even there were these old ladies that came out in front of me in the movie, and they were saying that. I had heard that before I even went to the theater. Some people were saying it. But I think it helped for me to know that, because I get it, because there is a false climax. There is a scene happening that feels very much like a climax. But because I had heard those criticisms, I kind of had it in the back of my head of, well, this isn't the ending, apparently. But then I was thinking about it, and it's like, well, even if I hadn't heard those criticisms beforehand, still, it's like, if the movie had ended where it looks like it's going to end, a lot of stuff would have been left open. It's like, we still have this person out there, we still have this person out there, this still needs to be resolved. And it's like, it's clearly not an ending. So my mind was already set for, like, we got about another 20 minutes or so I didn't have a problem with that. But also take into account this is an Emily Blunt movie where she's, like, a very main character, and it's like, I just can't imagine me thinking an Emily Blunt movie is too long. Because it's like, as long as she's on the screen, I'm so far away from thinking, I wonder when this is ending. Like, if I'm watching Emily Blunt on a theater screen, or even a TV screen, the last thing on my mind is, when is this ending? Because it's like, why would you... when you're watching her do her thing, why would you ever want that to end? So I would never really have that criticism anyway. I think some people think... I often forget Mary Poppins Returns is over 2 hours. Because it just doesn't... Nothing about that feels over 2 hours. And, like, none of her movies feel too long to me. Because I don't think you can ever have too much of her. And Gosling, for that matter. So that's something that just never occurred to me. But it's like, I can understand where people thought it might have been ending when it wasn't, but I'm completely unbothered by that. Somebody I haven't mentioned is Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I don't want to say too much about in this, but I'll just kind of throw out that I love the fact that he's been doing impressive things for a while there, but if you want to talk about the David Leitch connection, I did notice people really started to take to him after Bullet Train. Where he kind of got to be like this comedic character who was also like kind of cool and did the whole thing, and you know showed off like in this big actiony way. Because people know him as, like, Kick-Ass, where he was, like, he had his badass moments, but he was mostly pretty dorky. Um, and then, like, Godzilla, he got a lot of flack for it's like, oh, the main character's so bland, we want Godzilla and all that. At least since Nocturnal Animals, I've been on the Aaron Taylor Johnson train. And here he's got a lot of great moments. The part that he plays, the actor that Gosling's the stunt double for, where he just has to play that, really bloated ego, and then just like these little comedic moments in between. There's a moment during the climax where he has the most perfect look of absolute panic on his face for like 2 seconds. And it's just like those little moments in there. I really love when he kind of like plays that sleazy nature really well. We especially saw that in Nocturnal Animals. But yeah. So, and Hannah Waddingham obviously is fantastic. It was actually like we were like maybe halfway through the opening scene before I realized that was her. Just changing her hair color apparently Clark Kent's her into another personality to me. Her voice is kind of a giveaway, but yeah, it took me a second to register because I knew she was in the movie. But yeah, she's obviously fantastic also. And I also got to shout out Leach for one more thing about where I said, I haven't liked any of the movies he's directed yet until this one. One of the problems with a lot of those movies is the overabundance of cameos. Where the cameos are such a crutch in a lot of those movies. And they're so pointless. They have no purpose whatsoever. And if there's, like, anything cheaper in a movie, it's going for we'll just stick this person in this random part, and that'll get a laugh because, I'm surprised to see that person. For a movie set in the movie industry where any cameo would have made sense because you're, like, in Hollywood, there is one cameo in this movie, and it is perfect. And it's like, that's how you do it. That's how you do throwing in a surprise appearance from somebody. So it really feels like I said, those movies were kind of stepping stone. He may love those movies, and that's great. And like I said, people really love Bullet Train, especially, I've noticed. Like, the critics didn't, but anything I've heard about Bullet Train who wasn't a critic since the movie came out has been very high praise. So good for Bullet Train for being loved. But I really feel like this is the movie he's been aiming for. Like, probably since he started directing, it was like, I need to make something like this, is what was on his mind. And finally he's here. And the movie's great. So, that's, I guess, where I can leave this. So like I said, if it's going to be next, like, there's going to be a video, I'm going to do like a video on Challengers, and, something else like Argyle will probably be in there at some point. There might be a few videos in between, but then If will show up also sometime within like the next month. So yeah, because I'm still doing so much catch up on 2024 movies, so that's what I've been working on. So that's what we're looking forward to. So until the next thing, I think that's it.